What is going on, everybody? Back again today to bring you another toy review, specifically DC toy review. This is going to be other figures, DC figures, that I think can work well on display with McFarlane's DC Multiverse figures. I've talked a lot in the past about how my biggest gripe with the McFarlane DC Multiverse toy line is its lack of character variety. It's predominantly Batman heavy, and then on top of that, it's trying to do too many things at once. It's trying to do video game stuff. It's trying to do animated series stuff. It's trying to do comic book stuff. It's trying to do movie stuff. And between that and then also the heavy focus on Batman, we're getting these little half-ass we're getting a bunch of little half-ass collections rather than one really big awesome collection. So, of course, we want to try to like supplement the line with other figures from other lines if possible. Another gripe that I had with this toy line early on was the fact that when McFarlane Toys acquired the license from Mattel, they changed the scale. Mattel made their DC Multiverse figures, and before that, DC Universe Classics figures, they made them in the 6-inch scale. So they all fit together. When McFarlane took over, they switched to a bigger scale, 7-inch. I think this is due in part because McFarlane already had some 7-inch body molds done already for his Fortnite figure line. I also think it was in part due to a business decision of sort of Todd being like, "Oh, a bunch of collectors out there. They already have a Batman. They have multiple Batman figures. They have multiple Supermen, multiple Wonder Woman, multiple Martian Manhunter, Green Lanterns, multiple Flash, multiple New Gods, multiple different versions of all these characters. Unless I give them something very unique and specific, they're not going to rebuy these characters. They're just going to supplement what I give them with stuff that they already have. So he changed the scale. That way it's like, "Oh, to, if you want a Batman or a Superman or any character you want to go in this collection that I'm giving you with these figures that I'm giving you, it has to come from my line because no other DC toy line in the past fits my scale. So you have to buy all of mine." It's a smart business decision, but it kind of fucks over collectors in the long run. Uh, but there are a few figures from other toy lines that can fit in with McFarlane's DC Multiverse. And without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into what some of those are. So, right off the bat, the first few of these are going to be from Storm Collectibles. First up is Storm Collectibles Doomsday. This is Doomsday based on his look from the Injustice video game series. Now, it's not the most traditional comic book look, but then again, it's not Batman v Superman Doomsday, so it's pretty good. I think it would make a nice addition to anyone's DC Multiverse collection. I think it would look good right up next to, the Superman, Action Comics 1000 Superman. You can see here, I have included for scale reference. There's a picture of the Storm Collectibles Doomsday right next to the NECA Superman figure. And while this is not a McFarlane Toys Superman, this NECA Superman here, right here, it is essentially the same height and build of the McFarlane Superman. So in terms of height and scale, this is how the Doomsday would fit next to McFarlane. I think that looks great. I don't know about anyone else, but I've always liked the whole dynamic of Doomsday as this hulking monster, this giant titanic force to be reckoned with, and Superman, while being a muscular, physically fit looking human, is still just a normal average sized human. But he can go toe to toe with this. I've always thought that was a cool dynamic. Anytime I see of statues or diorama displays of Superman fighting Doomsday, I always like them more if Doomsday is much like significantly bigger than Superman. So I think this Doomsday would look really good in a McFarlane DC Multiverse collection. Only thing to think about here though, and this goes for all the Storm Collectibles figures on this list, Storm Collectibles are quite pricey. They are not cheap figures, so you really got to just kind of decide for yourself whether or not it's worth it, or if you just want to wait and see if Todd ever gives us a Doomsday figure, a more affordable Doomsday figure in his own multiverse line. So the next up is going to be Storm Collectibles Ares, another one that is really great. This figure is beautiful, it's highly detailed, the articulation's there. He comes with cool looking weapons. I can't say enough good things about this figure. The only downside is the price. Again, with Storm Collectibles, it is a little expensive, but you can see here from these pictures I've got for scale reference. Here's another NECA figure. This is Green Lantern this time. This is about the height and size of your average McFarlane DC Multiverse figure. And then over here we actually have a McFarlane Injustice Flash. I do think that this Flash is a little bit big. He's a bit larger, taller, beefier than the average McFarlane DC figure. I think this is more in line, but somewhere between this Flash and this Green Lantern is what you're working with for, the average McFarlane DC Multiverse figure. And so then you can see how this Ares stacks up next to them. So he would fit in really well. Ares is a character where I don't know about everybody else, but I want him to be significantly bigger than a normal size human, but I don't want him to be like doomsday monster size. So he's a god. He's not a normal human, but he's not some hulking monster creature. He's a god. He's the god of war. So this fits, I think. Ares, this Storm Collectibles Ares would make a great addition to your DC Multiverse collection. All right, continue on with Storm Collectibles. We've got their Injustice Darkseid. So a lot of these, pretty much every DC figure that Storm Collectibles has made is so far has been based on the Injustice game series, I think except for their Lobo figure. But that being said, I think it fits. It's not too it's not too different from a typical comic book look or maybe just an updated modernized version of their typical comic book look. So there's two versions here of the Darkseid from Storm Collectibles, and he looks good. It's the sleeveless tunic. It's the typical colors Darkseid wears, the dark blue with or dark purple. I think it looks really good. The face is done well, and it looks like he would come with alternate faces or heads, because this one's kind of more like a grimace, whereas this one's this just very stern, very stoic looking Darkseid. I think this guy would look really good paired up with some of McFarlane's DC Multiverse figures. And then, of course, for scale reference, we've got him next to McFarlane's DCEU Snyder Cut Darkseid figure, both the unarmored and the fully armored. You can see he's roughly the same size as those. And if this is an appropriate size Darkseid for McFarlane's toy line, then that means that this one is, because they're pretty much equally the same size. So this guy would look really good. If this one is just, he's very movie, he's from the movie. He doesn't really fit well with your standard comic book style figures. He's meant to go with on a display with the other movie figures. But this guy, I think, has just the right amount of comic book add. I forget. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I gotta think of the right word for it. He's got that just enough of a comic book look to him to make it where he would fit with a lot of McFarlane's figures. So the last of the Storm Collectibles figures on this list is Bane. Now, some people are gonna like this option and might even go for it. Personally, for me, I don't. I would never buy this Bane figure to pair up with my McFarlane DC Multiverse, and I will explain why. But first, let's just take a look. If you're the kind of person who likes a really big, just kind of like ridiculously large, beefy, veiny, monstrous looking Bane, then this is probably the one for you. You can see this is the McFarlane Action Comics 1000 Superman, and this is a customized McFarlane Detective Comics 1000 Batman. And you can see how this Bane stacks up next to them in terms of scale. He is incredibly well painted, well detailed. He's got decent articulation. It's a great looking figure. However, like I said, this is only going to appeal to someone that likes the idea of having the ridiculously huge Bane. Me personally, I've always been more of a fan of, while Bane is a very strong human being, he is still just a normal human being. Even when he's on Venom, Venom gives him, a little bit of added strength and maybe makes his veins in his arms and stuff pop out a bit more. But Venom would not make Bane 12 feet tall. You know what I mean? So a Bane figure this large in comparison with typical characters like Batman and Superman, this doesn't work for me. But I acknowledge that there's probably some people out there that they do like Bane when he's what's the word I'm looking for? When he's depicted as being just ridiculously large and overtly huge and muscular and veiny. That maybe that's the Bane that people like. So if that's the case, then this one's probably for you. Storm, once again, from Storm Collectibles, a little on the pricier side, so you got to decide for yourself if it's worth it. So moving out of Storm Collectibles, this is one that I actually intend to do. This is the Mattel DC Universe Classics Bane. This was their Build-A-Figure Bane. And if you're, like I said, a fan of a more realistically proportioned Bane, you want him to be, a big, muscular guy, because that's what he's supposed to be, but you don't want him to be out of this world huge, then this Bane figure will fit in, I think, pretty well. You can see here for size and scale reference, they have him right next to the classic Detective Batman from DC Universe Classics, and he stands a good 2 inches taller than this guy. Meaning, and this guy, I believe DC's standard height for Mattel's standard height for their classics figures was about 6.5 inches. So you're looking at about 8.5 inches for this Bane, which makes him about an inch to an inch and a half taller than your standard McFarlane figure. So he will still stand a tiny bit taller than your average McFarlane DC Multiverse figure, but he will also not look overtly huge. He will still look like a somewhat normal dude, just a very big, very muscular, very physically powerful human being. So that's a good option for people who prefer a more realistically proportioned Bane. Next up is going to be Mattel's Clayface figure from their DC Multiverse line. This is another one of their build-a-figure collect and connect figures, and it turned out very well. It's got good paint quality, shading, decent articulation for what the figure is. It's a big man made out of clay, monster made out of clay. So obviously he's not supposed to be the most flexible and posable guy around, or at least that would be very hard to translate into toy form without making the figure made of like rubber with bendy wires in it. But it's a pretty good figure overall, and it fits in with size and scale. Once again, we have a slightly customized DC Universe Classics Nightwing figure, another one of their figures that's made in the standard 6.5 inch scale, and you can see how Clayface here looks next to him. So if this is where Nightwing's head stops, you can probably assume that a standard McFarlane DC Multiverse figure is probably going to be up to about here, maybe up to like the beginning of Clayface's shoulder. So he will still seem very large and imposing, even up next to a McFarlane figure, but he won't be overtly huge. If you want an overtly enormous, grandstanding Clayface figure for your collection, this is not the one. He will be a little bigger and bulkier than your average McFarlane figures, but he's not going to be overtly huge. I still think he would make a good addition. I think he would fit in pretty well, though. And then I believe the last one we have on our list is Mattel's Killer Croc from their DC Multiverse line. So, pardon me. So kind of similar with what I was saying about the Bane figures. This is another one where if you like this character depicted as this overtly huge, ridiculously large monster, then this figure will probably appeal to you. However, if you're more of a fan of Killer Croc portrayed as, your average size human, he just has some skin deformity issues going on, then this guy might seem a little too big to you. Once again, he's paired up here for size and scale reference with some average size Mattel DC figures. So for McFarlane, just take any of these guys here and add about an inch or an inch and a half onto them. So whereas Alfred, his head comes up to about like, the bicep on Killer Croc, an average McFarlane figure is probably going to come all the way up to the shoulder, if not maybe a little bit higher. So you got to think about it like this Killer Croc, even up next to a bigger figure like McFarlane's, he's still going to seem very large. But if that's the version of Killer Croc that you like, then it should work for you. And if not, then I don't know. You got to wait till McFarlane decides to make one for us. So that's pretty much it that I've found. There are a few other Build-A-Figures, collect and connect figures from the different Mattel waves that could possibly work with DC Multiverse, uh, but a lot of them just have a very, what's the word I'm looking for? McFarlane adds a lot more stylized detail to the sculpts of his figures. So there are quite a few Mattel Build-A-Figure and collect and connect figures that fit with McFarlane in terms of like size and scale, but in terms of just overall appearance and their lacking of as much detail, they would stand out a little bit. I think out of everything I mentioned there, the Storm collectibles are going to be the ones that blend in the best. But, I think the Clayface would also probably fit pretty well. And the Mattel Bane or the Killer Croc, maybe, if you did a little extra paint detail on there, they might stand in pretty well. But I think everything on that list is doable. There are others though that it's up to your personal preference. You can fudge them in there or not. So let me know what you guys think. Do you guys know of any other figures that I might have missed that could also fit with DC Multiverse, McFarlane DC Multiverse? If you do, please leave some comments below. Let me know. I would like to know what those figures are, because from the looks of it, we're just never going to get a huge amount of variety from McFarlane. It's going to be just piecemealed out to us very slowly over large amounts of time. We're looking at probably, like, at this rate, we're probably looking at 2025, 2026, we will have a full Justice League, if that. So, yeah. But yeah, if you like this video, please hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. If you want to help out the channel even more, check out some of my other videos, maybe subscribe. But other than that, I will see you guys next time.